Can you guys hear me? Super. All right. Kat Townsend.
Georgia Bullen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys. We have been working together on various projects for the past year-ish and sometimes longer. I think the purpose of this session is to share some of the research. I wanted to give you some background as well. But I just wanted to start off by thanking you all for coming tonight. It's great to see your faces. It's great to talk with many of you. I want to thank David, Amira, Sandra, Josh, the whole team who has really made this possible and brought this work together. Also want to thank the people who have been involved in this work. This is a really difficult topic. A lot of people are coming to it because they have personal experiences. They're sharing their own stories. Some people who are involved in this work also have those experiences, and it's really heavy, and there's not a lot of support out there. So I'm just very grateful to be in this space, and for anybody who contributes to it, just, thank you. Okay. So some of the work that I'd like to share out is through a project and a series of events and partnerships through something called the Web Foundation. So we work on preventing and countering online gender-based violence. I might stand and go through this, if that's okay with you. Thank you. It's because there's a look back thing here. Okay. So for those of you who haven't heard it before, what is the Web Foundation? Well, it was started by Tim Berners-Lee, who invented websites. So the internet actually runs the piping of everything that connects us. Websites are what we use to connect with each other, share our creativity, share our ideas. So started the foundation with this overarching vision of how could the web be a place where anybody around the world could connect, could share themselves, could share their ideas and their creativity, regardless of where they're from. Small mission. Truly, it's a wealth of possibilities of the things that Web Foundation can get involved in. And so then you say, well, all right, so what should we prioritize? How do we tackle it? Started out with something called a web index. This used to be a global survey that was done country by country, would take a few key topics: net neutrality, privacy, empowerment, and gender. And really learned, wow, there's a lot of divisions, and there's a lot of reasons that gender is one of the root causes of not being able to have that vision of a web that is for everyone. A few stats. A lot of this stuff is work that you all know very well, perhaps you have contributed to or you've heard tonight. But even just getting online is difficult. This stat is almost 25% on men have 25% more likelihood to even be able to access the web than women do. We learned from our partners in a lot of this. In Chile, 75% of all messages sent to female politicians are insults, they're violent, or they're abusive and hate speech. And so clearly from this work, gender was a big focus. But we said, all right, but still we have this really broad mission and this really broad vision. Let's go to more partners and say, what else do we need to focus on? So we started something called Contract for the Web and worked with 80 different leading organizations from around the world and said, what's broken online? What needs to change? What needs to improve? And came up with this multi-stakeholder approach and said, all right, here are some principles, here are sort of values, missions, where we want to go. And what are the responsibilities here? There's a government responsibility, there's responsibilities and roles for companies, and responsibilities and roles for everybody who uses, so individuals, civil society. But throughout all of this, it still came back to gender. That gender was one of the key issues that was the reason that the web was not at the space where it should be. All right, so we do a lot of work with partnerships. The Contract for the Web was our own attempt at having sort of a vision document that everybody could abide by online. There's actually active work that's happening out of the UN called the Global Digital Compact. Some of you may have heard of this. There's an office that's relatively new called the US Tech Envoy, and they are devising what is the responsibility online for all member states and for all partners. What are their priorities? We are trying to work gender in there and to have that all throughout. I very much encourage anybody who is interested in governance at the UN to get involved in those spaces. But those are some of the partnerships that we try to work with. And then on our side, we said, all right, what can we uniquely do? we have this platform, what kind of role can we take forward? And ran something called a technology policy design lab. So the idea behind these is you have a multi-stakeholder process. You get all of these different stakeholders, academics, politicians, media, technologists, civil society leaders, gender justice, digital rights organizations, and you try to get them to come to a consensus and say, all right, what could we change? What policy needs to be changed? What product needs to be shifted? Or what process, what implementation could be improved? Can we agree on that? And is that something that we can offer that is then measurable, something actionable that we can evaluate and take forward? So we ran a few of these. It was 2020 and 2021. So a bunch of the convenings and workshop look like this. Seems very familiar. And then in the end, we actually joined this group, which is the Generation Equality Forum. Again, some here may be quite familiar with this initiative out of the UN, $40 billion to try to close some of the gaps on gender divide, one of which is digital. And we got some commitments from tech companies on there. So these are, this was a written agreement that Meta, at the time Facebook, Google, TikTok, and Twitter said, all right, we've heard you, we've participated in these workshops, and we are going to change the curation so that people have a different view of what they see in their social media feeds and reporting. It will be easier to say, this has happened and you need to respond to it. And then we worked with still more partners. And a year after, we worked with tech companies and said, okay, so what changed? And they said, look, we've made real progress. Here's our curation changes and here's our reporting changes. And we said, wonderful. How has that improved user experience? Do you have any evidence of that? And they said, no. So you don't collect data on that? Oh, no, we know it's working, but we can't share that with you because that's a violation of privacy. Okay, so we're meant to just trust that that these changes have had a measurable impact. Unfortunately, it's very hard to evaluate whether this has actually come to any benefit. Why do we care so much? Why does this matter? So I'll just pull from one of, if you don't know Hera's work, if you don't know Chan, I absolutely encourage you to check it out. But she really put it best. We're going to lose female and queer voices and amazing ideas in public service because we didn't create an environment to keep them safe. And if that's not an existential reason of what we need to do to make the web a better place, that's really what we're driving for. All right, and so then we said, we got to stick with it. So what do we need to do? We need the data. They're not sharing the data. How do we get the data? Who's working on it? What's out there? You've heard from the earlier panelists some of the problems with data collection. We'll get into it. We also want to know who else is doing this work. So we've got these big four tech companies. What are other companies who are committed? What kind of progress are they making? Who's doing this well? Who's not doing it well? And then it's really who is the global civil society that's driving this forward? Because what we hear over and over again from platforms is, there's too many of you. You guys are all fragmented. You're asking us for all of these different things. And it's very easy to fragment a space and to say, well, we'll just talk with these 15 groups, or we'll just talk with our version of who we consider is the authoritative network. And if we can get a group of civil society together that is able to say, if you validate and if you evaluate the changes you're making with us, then they can have sort of an independent voice. They can push back against some of these companies. So here's one of them. This is the Women's Rights Online Network. This is some of the group of women, not everybody here, quite a few others. But one of the first times I was actually able to see people in person after 2 years was this group, and it was pretty fantastic. At the moment, it's 18 different gender justice and digital rights organizations from around the world who've been working on these issues for decades. I'm going to start throwing a lot of URLs at you. First one is Women's Rights Online. So we worked with them over the past sort of half a year and brought together 130 different reports, data sets, stories on across 40 different countries. Dove into those reports and analysis in 30 and found that found a lot of different results. I would say the experiences vary. There was a data that was shared that 50% of women across Africa have experienced gender violence online. It's another report that we evaluated. But we've got 50% of female journalists in Pakistan reported violence online. 100% of the female public figures in Paraguay all said that they'd been harassed. Not present here, but I'm sure you all know that 93% of all hateful messages online in New Zealand were directed at Jacinda Ardern, for example. So the prevalence of the experience online, especially for people in the public eye, looms large. 38% of all women who identified as women reported they had a personal experience themselves. This rises for Gen Z and millennials. And a stat that we often know well is that 85% of women online have witnessed violence against women. So this gives you, what is the enabling environment? What do people expect when they come online? They expect to see harassment. They expect to be harassed themselves. And by the numbers that does not exist, what we don't have, as had been mentioned, is we don't have real stats. We don't have anything authoritative, anything comprehensive from governments, from either national, local, or from tech companies that say, here's really what the experience is online. Part of that is because we don't have the shared ontology. Most of it is because we don't have the will. Some of the key takeaways. A lot of this you've heard, and so I would just offer that the women who are speaking here, who are experts, their expertise is borne out in the data and in the research. So when you're hearing these, it might seem evident and obvious, but all of it comes from a place of deep and longstanding research. So one is the problem's getting worse. We can talk about it, we can be aware of it, but we're not taking the steps at any level to really curb this in a meaningful way. So OGBV is on the rise. Mostly what we're able to count and see are direct attacks, cyberbullying, harassment, defamation, also non-consensual image abuse is rising. As mentioned, anyone who is already in a vulnerable position are most targeted. LGBTQI+, BIPOC, any woman who's has a presence in the public eye. Many don't report. They either don't report with their local organizations, they don't report to the tech platforms, and part of the reason that they don't is when they do, they don't get a satisfying response. One major data gap is we don't know about perpetrators. All of the data that's really collected is for survivors to report themselves. Relive this experience for us, write it for us in a way that is easy for us to digest and understand. And the problem there is a lot of people don't know what harms they're causing. They just think that they're being online. So what I'm also very curious about is what is the environment that's getting people to become perpetrators? What are the, sort of the gaming headset language that you're getting in? What are the comment section of the Mr. Beast videos? Like, what is radicalizing people without them realizing that what they're doing is they're engaging in abusive behavior that's causing direct harm? And people really may not know. And without having any of that kind of information, we're not going to be able to stop it. And then finally, I would just emphasize that the outsized impact, it's often seen that this is just an online space. It's just happening in a virtual world. So it really doesn't have that much impact. But emotional, financial, a lot of commerce is done online, jobs that people can get, social, physical well-being, and women really censor themselves, that they withdraw, and others, women in all their complexities, withdraw from online spaces. So we're losing their voices and we're losing leadership as a result. If you are curious about the kind of work that we've done, URL number 2 is a map that we've put together of these stories, researchers, case studies, and the policies around the world. This is intended to be a living map. It is a resource library for anybody to go to, draw, and learn from. This will never be the sole definitive resource, but we're trying to put it out into the space. Are there other different sort of gatherings so that we can maybe federate and collate some way to say, here is the breadth of knowledge and understanding that we have. Here's the kind of data that we have that we can gather up. So we'll continue to work on that. And all of these resources are available on this website, Global Landscape, the strategies that we've used, the resource list, and partners that we've worked with. There are incredible organizations around the world that I recommend engaging with and following up on. And so now that we've set this tone, what can we actually do? And where do we go next?
Hi, everybody. And yeah, Kat laying out all of the work that has led up to this. One of the things that she mentioned is this concept of this tech policy design lab. So my organization, Superbloom, has been working with the Web Foundation over the last year. We helped facilitate a tech policy design lab focused on deceptive design, which I would say has a ton of intersection with this conversation we're having today, to the point of, oh no, we lost our slides. Oh, there you go. Okay. To the point of how, for there, what we're really focusing on is how to address the way that design of tools is being done that helps to facilitate things like perpetration of violence, or I mean, everything from making purchases you don't intend to, like coercive design, things like that, to facilitating real harms that affect people like we've been talking about tonight. As part building on that, we have been working on trying to take the methodology and turn it into a playbook that folks could use to facilitate conversations on building interventions, as Kat was mentioning, around products, policies, and processes. And so there's the next link that we showed up here is that sort of work in progress playbook, which we'll be launching and promoting more in the coming weeks. As part of follow on from this, what I would love to do is, if there's folks that are working on issues where they're thinking about like, oh, I have an idea, or these are the folks I need to get together, it'd be great to talk with you and find out ways we could test these tools to help facilitate these conversations. How do we, who do we need in the room? How do we get more of the people who've been kept out of the room there into the room, so that we can have more inclusive conversations, more effective conversations, and actually work towards designing solutions? From my perspective, one of the things our organization is really focused on is exactly the problem that Alex brought up on the previous panel around this lack of feminist technologists was the frame that you used, and I love that. But that's we need people to we need to be thinking about ways that we can address these problems differently and work together on building these sort of new types of interventions. So I would love to talk more with folks after this on the challenges you're working on and ideas that you want to play through, and talk about ways to get feedback on testing this out. Yeah, if you want the next one. An example of how we're going to try to take the model and work, we're thinking about focusing in on more specific topics. So one thing that we're going to be doing this spring is working with an academic at Northumbria University, Dr. Carolina R., at the Center for Digital Citizens, around running some workshops focused on malicious flagging, where we're going to bring together survivors of malicious flagging with platform teams to co-design solutions. What could it look like to change the way the reporting mechanisms work? Like, how do you actually think about care for the person who is experiencing the deplatforming of malicious flagging? How do we change that dynamic of exactly that feeling heard and getting back online, right, when so much of this is used in a weaponized way, as also was talked about on the last panel. So yeah, and then I think next slide. Yeah.
Okay, so the one just to note is that like there's this idea that the web is done, or that the internet is done and it's just stuck and stagnant, but it's not, and we create it every single day. And so it took all of us to make it what it is right now, and it's going to take us to build the future. And so this is your space, and really glad that you're here and leading it. Thank you.